I'm Veronica Steffensmeier. I've been a master gardener since 2009, and I really enjoy growing odd and unusual fall vegetables. And I'll talk a little bit about that in this presentation. Fall is my favorite time of the year to grow vegetables. There's time to grow and harvest vegetables for your Thanksgiving table. You can grow vegetables that will last several weeks to months in a cool, dark place or a root cellar. And row covers will protect your crops from frost and extend the growing season. Not to mention, the temperatures are cooler, a lot more comfortable, and there are fewer mosquito insects to bite you. Now, I find there are way more varieties of vegetables to grow in the fall than there are in the spring and the hot summer months. Now, when the temperatures rise into the 80s, most vegetables will grow dormant. But your wonderful cool crop brassicas will keep on growing. There are many different vegetables in this category. We have cabbage, bok choy, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, and the most favorite southern vegetable, collard greens. Now, my motto is, if you plant it, they will come. So there are a lot of common pests that will be chewing and sucking on your plants, even when you're growing them in the winter. Cabbage worm, tobacco cutworm, cabbage looper, aphids, they're all familiar pests that will invade your gardens, and there are solutions. You can use BT sprays. This is a naturally occurring bacteria found in soil and food, or you can use diatomaceous earth. And that's simply a ground powdered stone that you can sprinkle on your plants, and the pests will crawl into it and literally dehydrate. Neem oil, pyrethrin spray, insecticidal soap are all good ways to deal with these pests, and row covers are also a good idea. And there is actually something called a decoy moth, which is simply a little artificial moth that you can stick them on your vegetables, and that will trick real moths from landing on them. Now, a word about fertilizers. You can use a synthetic fertilizer, you can use an organic fertilizer, or you can use an all-purpose fertilizer. I prefer organic fertilizers, but right now they're very expensive, they're hard to find, and I've been telling people who ask to simply use 10-10-10. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using a chemical fertilizer. A word about potting soil. For everything you plant, you want to enrich your soil. Now, you can buy bagged potting soil from a garden store or a nursery or one of the big bag stores, and it says that it has fertilizer in it. But I like to add my own amendments. So garden soil is much too heavy. Make sure you don't go dig up soil in your backyard, because it may also contain pests, weeds, and other undesirable materials. Now, I like to mix my own potting soil. I grow a lot of vegetables in containers, and I have a lot of containers. You can go on the website, you can check YouTube. There are many different potting soil mixes. I prefer this one. It's very simple. I use 1/3 sphagnum peat moss, 1/3 very inexpensive topsoil, and 1/3 compost. And I usually take a big tarp, spread it out in my garden, take a shovel, and mix it up and use that to fill my containers. Now, for drainage, you can add perlite or vermiculite and limestone, and that'll make your soil nice and light and nice and fluffy. The peat moss will add bulk to the potting soil. The perlite will improve drainage. And one thing to remember, all of these components, when you're mixing your own soil, they lack nutrients. So you are going to have to add extra fertilizer. Now, one of my favorite things to grow is winter cabbage. And there are lots of different varieties of cabbage. There's red cabbage and Chinese, Savoy cabbage, bok choy, and Brussels sprouts are in the cabbage family. Cabbage is very easy to plant, and when you buy it in the box stores, you simply need to put it where it will get 8 hours of full sun in a well-drained soil. You can till fertilizer and lime into the upper top 5 inches of the soil. Make sure you space them about 18 inches apart, and keep them regularly watered, and watch out for those insects, your cabbage worm, your cabbage looper, and make sure you have your pesticides on hand to deal with those pests when they come. And one thing that's important to remember, do not plant cabbage where broccoli, Brussels sprouts, or collards were planted in the previous year. One of my favorites, it's red cabbage. I lived in Europe a long time, and it's very popular there during the winter holidays. It's a beautiful red color. It adds wonderful color to your garden, and it has a very unique flavor. In Europe, they like to pickle it, and they'll even roast it in the oven with apples, cinnamon, cloves, red sugar, and wine. And it's a favorite of Germans during the Christmas holidays. Now, some unusual varieties of winter cabbage are Chinese Napa cabbage, Savoy cabbage, and Caraflex. Now, I was lucky. I love Savoy and Caraflex, mainly because these two varieties stay very small, and I'm in a two-person household. And with Caraflex cabbage, which is also called pointed cabbage, you can eat the entire cabbage. It's ready in about 70 days. There's no waste, and it cooks within minutes. And again, all of these varieties stay relatively small. So here's a picture of Savoy cabbage, which I actually found at Home Depot last year, and it's growing in a large container up on my deck. And you can see these are really nice, beautiful round heads. They're very small. The upper picture to the left is where I started them, and the late stage is where I harvested them. Now, I also like bok choy, and I started a crop of bok choy in Dixie cups. I simply put some drainage in the bottom, planted them, left them indoors under my grow lights. They got so big under the grow lights, they were almost ready to eat. And when they were ready, you can see here in my raised bed, I planted them next to my cabbage and my curly kale. And it was a really wonderful vegetable to grow and very easy to cook and harvest. Now, the best cabbage varieties, if you're buying red cabbage, try to look for Danish roundhead. And I did find Caraflex, and it was called Early Jersey Wakefield at Home Depot, and I also found a variety of Savoy cabbage. So in this cabbage family, we also have cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and broccoli. Now, broccoli is a very easy vegetable to grow. It takes a low nitrogen fertilizer. You want to look for a 5-10-10. And you can add bone meal. Again, 6 to 8 hours of sun. Make sure you amend that soil with some very good fertilizer and some compost amendments. Simply till your bed 8 to 10 inches, space 18 inches apart. And after everything you plant, always remember to mulch. Mulch will keep down weeds and prevent nutrients from escaping from your soil. Now, I love cauliflower, and it's very popular these days to rice it. The problem is it can be very difficult to grow. So if you're a first-time grower, you might want to avoid cauliflower. If you want to tackle it and you want to pick it up at the box stores, make sure you get heads that are already pre-blanched. Now, blanching means that you have to keep that really white, lovely head from turning yellow or brown. And there's a way you can fold the leaves up over the white head. Now, I've never had luck with it. So I've simply been buying it at the supermarket. But again, fertilize, use the proper spacing, don't forget to water. And one disease that cauliflower, broccoli, cabbages get in general is a downy mildew. It's a very white, powdery looking fungus disease. And you really should look at the different types of diseases that attack fall vegetables and the insects. Look at the pictures on the internet. You can simply Google them, become familiar with them so that you know what you're dealing with. Now, one vegetable that I really love is Brussels sprouts. They don't need as much sun as broccoli. They can get away with about 6 hours of sun. And you want to fertilize them like all the other vegetables at regular intervals. I call Friday my fertilizer day simply because it starts with an F. So I use fish emulsion, which is a liquid fertilizer. Doesn't have a very pleasant smell, but it's also organic. And I fertilize with fish emulsion every Friday. Cruciferous leafy greens. There are lots of vegetables in this category. There are spinach, collard greens, and kale. There are all different varieties of kale, and all different varieties of spinach and collard greens. So if you're looking at the box stores, you're pretty much limited to what's available. Now, these vegetables prefer full sun, but one advantage is that they can also be grown in partial shade. You also feed them regularly, the same thing with mulching. They'll tolerate a light frost, which is good. And I have a way of planting these vegetables that is a little bit different from the way you would normally space them. I plant them very close together, and I simply pull away the outer leaves, and I'll show you a picture of that. It's called cut and grow, and I'll have a slide of that coming up. So they do prefer full sun, but again, you can grow these in partial shade. And I like to feed them with a water-soluble plant food, and that's why I use the fish emulsion. So collard greens, those are one of our favorites. Now, you can start these with plants, which is more advantageous than starting them from seed. They're a little hard to start from seed. And they, again, will also tolerate shade. And you want to feed them once a week, as I mentioned before. So most of the rules for all of these leafy greens are the same. My favorite is actually Swiss chard, and this is a picture of rainbow Swiss chard. Again, many different varieties. It also comes in green. It's a really good source of vitamins C, K, and A, and it's also full of omega-3 fatty acids. And it'll maintain, it'll take and tolerate a light frost. And what I like about it is both the stems and the leaves are edible, and you can eat them raw or you can eat them cooked. It's also very low in calories, only 19 per 100 grams, and it's a really important food in the low cholesterol, low fat diet. So I really love to grow a lot of Swiss chard. You will find this in just about all of the box stores, and I always grow the rainbow variety because it's so pretty. Now, growing Swiss chard, it takes a lot of light, at least 8 to 10 hours of sunshine a day. So purchase your starter plants, space them properly. You can fertilize with a 10-10-10 or what I use, fish emulsion. Make sure you harvest the leaves when they're tender. If you let it grow too long, they get a little bit tough and it takes much longer to cook it. So here's a picture of my cut and come again kale. You'll see that it's very densely planted, and you can plant them either from the box store or from seed. And all I do is harvest the large outer leaves, and it'll just keep growing and growing. This container set up of my deck, and I was still harvesting kale in June. This variety is curly kale. Now, there are just dozens and dozens of different types of lettuce. My favorite is romaine. I also love radicchio because it's a pretty color. I don't really care for lettuces that don't have a lot of substance to the leaves. Belgian endive is a very unusual, wonderful lettuce to grow because when you pull it apart, you get these really nice little boats that you can put different foods in and serve as an appetizer. Now, you plant your lettuce the same way you would any leafy green, but one unusual way to plant it is to grow it in a soil bag. You simply buy a large sack of fertilized soil. You can buy container soil, and you open it up as pictured, split the top and open it up so the flaps are on the side. Add a little potting mix, add a little black cow, add a little fertilizer 10-10-10, and fill the bag up to about 1 inch from the top with your extra potting mix. Now you can put your little starter plants, as you see pictured, in that bag and actually grow them. And if you take some plastic containers, some empty Coke bottles that are clear, you can put those over your little starter plants to protect them and simply grow your lettuce all through the winter. It's a really fun way to have things up on your deck that are close at hand. And you don't need a container. And one thing about leafy vegetables is they are all suitable and wonderful to grow in containers. And you can even mix your Swiss chard with some of your winter annuals. It's colorful, it's lovely, and it's edible. So this is the time of year where we can direct seed some vegetables. That's really nice because it doesn't always have to be started indoors, and you don't always have to buy them at the box stores. There are lots of varieties of beet seeds, and there are lots of varieties of radishes and lettuces, and your carrots, and your turnips, and your mustard greens. All of these vegetables can be grown now from seed. So you can still go to any of the stores, Home Depot to Walmart, or order your seeds online. Now, if you are growing from seeds, we have to wait here in the South until our soil temperature reaches roughly between 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Right now, we still have some pretty warm weather, but it's starting to cool off, and we like to get those seeds in the ground and give them enough time for those roots to really get established. Make sure you look on your seed packet and follow the directions. You can use a hand tool to cut a little furrow away, but I usually just stick my finger in, and then I put my seeds in the hole and gently cover them with a little soil. Now, don't water with your watering hose. You want to keep your seeds moist until they germinate, but you want to just mist them with a water bottle or you'll displace them. And we know that overhead watering can cause disease. So all through your growing season, always water your plants directly from the root only. So when your plants reach about 2 inches tall, you want to thin some of them out. And this is one reason I like the cut and come and grow method. I don't like thinning plants. It's very cumbersome. And I usually plant all of my leafy vegetables dense. But if you really want to grow things like your Savoy cabbage or let's say your Napa cabbage, you really do want to space those because they're not good to grow together. They really grow rather large and compact. So those seeds you want to space. Now, I love herbs, and I like to cook with herbs, and herbs are perfect for growing in containers, and you'll find different varieties in the stores and the nurseries all season long. Most herbs are, oddly enough, cool season plants in our area because it gets very hot, especially cilantro. Cilantro does not like the heat at all. And I love to grow basil. I grow lots of basil, I grow garlic, I make pesto, and I freeze it in containers to have during the winter. Most people think basil does really well in 6 to 8 hours of full sun. It actually prefers dappled light, about 4 to 6 hours a day. It does not do well in full sun. And when you're growing basil, you want to make sure it doesn't flower from the center. You want to pinch those leaves back. That'll make your basil plants fuller and keep them growing. And when you cut them, simply go down to a leaf, clip off a piece, and you can put that in water and start the plant again. My basil usually grows well into the winter season, even into early December. I love garlic, and there are so many different varieties. I'm still working my way through the different flavors and tastes. You can grow garlic from what we call seed garlic, which is simply a head of garlic. Break it apart, make sure you keep the skin on the little bulbs, and you plant them, I would say, between mid-September and October, 6 inches apart, and make sure that the little top of the garlic that has the little roots visible, that's the end you stick in the ground, about 1 inch deep, and then cover them with a little soil. Now, they like nitrogen, so I add blood meal, and I fertilize them regularly with blood meal, maybe once or twice a month through the growing season. Now, they do take a long time to grow to maturity. I put mine in October, and I don't harvest it until June, July. So it really depends on how much full sun you're getting, but they do like a lot of full sun. I grow a variety that is called hardneck garlic. Now that means that long stem coming out of it is hard and firm, and that'll produce a scape. And scapes are wonderful. They're like long green onions, and you can cut them up and use them in cooking. They have a flavor similar to green onions and to spring onions. And that's one reason I like to grow hardneck garlic. It also does very well here in the South. Softneck garlic simply produces a leaf that I guess you can also eat it, but I've never grown it. So you can go to some of the farmers markets here to find hardneck garlic. You can also find it at some of the feed stores. And you can purchase it at Clayton Feed, which is in Ball Ground, and they have a very reasonable price. Now you can also grow it, you can find it online. I find it to be a bit expensive, and I always have to buy more bulbs than I want to plant. And in a pinch, you can buy it in the supermarket and simply plant that. Now, growing onions from sets is an easy way to grow them. You can buy sets, again, the same place you would buy garlic, either online from the different stores that sell seeds, or you can buy them at places like Ace Hardware or in our area here in Cherokee County and Canton, Clayton feed. And they have different sets in, you can get sets for little red onions, for spring onions, and this is an easy way to plant them this time of year. You simply press them into the loose soil, no more than an inch deep, space them 4 to 5 inches apart, and you want to set the bulbs with the point end up. You want to mulch with straw again. This will keep the moisture in and prevent weeds. Now, fall root vegetables are my favorite type of vegetables to grow. I like growing fall root vegetables because they take a very long time to mature, and they also can be housed or stored in your root cellar or a nice cool place. I store them in my basement in a back room. And these are your root vegetables. Some of them are things we don't really see that often in the grocery stores. There's a picture here of, in the front to the right, that is kohlrabi. Kohlrabi is a wonderful vegetable that you can slice and use like potatoes. Behind the carrots, there's some root celery. That's a wonderful vegetable that you can use in soups. Parsnips are also wonderful to grow, very much like cabbage. And you can grow sweet potatoes and white potatoes, which you would have to start in the spring in March. Now, I also grow some other things underground. I grow my own ginger. I grow my own lemongrass. That's what it is. I grow my own lemongrass, and I grow my own ginger. I like to do a lot of Asian cooking, and rather than have to rely on finding these things in the stores, I like to go out and simply grow my own. You simply find a very large, shallow container, no more than 8 inches deep, and if you're planting ginger, or if you're planting turmeric, or if you're planting lemongrass, you only want to put them about 1 inch deep into the soil and simply cover with a little dirt, keep them moist, and keep them regularly fertilized. When to plant has become a really big issue here in the South. One problem we have is that the weather fluctuates. Now, the last few years, we've had a frost at the end of April. We had it on the 21st, I think in 2020, and then in 21, we had a frost on the 24th. Temperatures were down really, really low into the 20s. So if you have any of your vegetables planted then, you would have lost them. One way to avoid this is to have your row covers ready to go. And row covers are simply a lightweight cloth. They go over hoops that go over your vegetables to protect them. They will let light in. And as I said before, row covers are very good because they will keep out those little pesky bugs that crawl, and you will be able to grow them well into the winter. Now, I have traditionally put my seeds in about now. And if you're growing broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, carrots, or celery, you want to plant those 10 to 12 weeks before the first frost. Now, if you're planting arugula, the cabbage, collards, or other green leafy vegetables, Swiss chard and turnips, you want to get those in 8 to 10 weeks before the first frost. And as we go down this slide that you see, when to plant your beets, your radishes, and on the average, we have a frost from November 5th through April 4th. But again, in those odd years, the last couple of years, we have had those frosts at the end of April. So one way to know exactly when to plant is a plant seed calendar. And this is a very simple one. We have one up on our UGA website. That one is much more detailed, but I like to use this one because you can see by the shade of the color when you're going to be planting those vegetables. So right now, we're in the red colored area for the fall vegetables. So you can still put beans in from September to October. You can plant your broccoli from September to October. And you can put your cauliflower in from September to October. And if you just go down that line, you'll see kale, lettuce, peas, spinach, and I wouldn't put in squash and tomatoes now. You may be able to still get a crop in, but I tend to start clearing out my bed for fall vegetables. Now, most of these things you're going to be buying from the box stores, so you're really dependent upon what they're offering when it comes to variety. But if you do want to quickly direct seed some vegetables, there are some very popular seed companies. Everyone knows that I'm a big fan of Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds because it's the only seed company that will ship you your seeds free of delivery charges. And with every pack of seeds, you will receive one free pack. Garlic bulbs and onion sets, again, Clayton Homestead in Canton or Ace Hardware, or you can find any of these garlic, onion sets, and even seeds online. And Norse Nursery, that is one good source of garlic, and I have used them in the past. Are there any questions? Here's a website for the Cherokee Master Gardeners. And if you go on that link, you'll find out a lot of the information about the Master Gardeners. You can find information about upcoming events, other classes that we offer, teaching on other areas of gardening. There's one up on gardening and how to grow from seed. We also have our newsletter, and you can find out where you can read that on our website, and videos of teaching programs like this one. And in a few days, you will also find this website link up on the CherokeeMasterGardeners.com link.